Thank you for joining us today with the ALU as this diverse panel explores knighthood in Amtgard. What does it mean to them? Why does Amtgard have it? Is it worth it? And was it a goal of Amtgard to exist? All of this and more will be explored today with the ALU. First, I would like to ask each panel member to introduce themselves and briefly talk about the 2 or 3 main points that they wish to discuss today, starting with my left.
So I'm TyeDye. I was knighted at Keep last year, and my main point is that knighthood is a terrible, terrible goal and should never be your goal.
I am Show Obsidian. I'm from the Pacific Northwest, Kingdom of Northern Lights. I've been a knight for 8 years. I was knighted at Rosewood last year. I guess the way you present yourself prior to knighthood and how you treat your peers would be something I'd like to talk about.
Absolutely. I'm Khazon, and I got knighted in Winter's Edge, and I'm here to talk about just knighthood in general, but in particular leadership, being a professional, and how you should behave if you're actually looking to become a knight later on.
Hi, I'm GoldCrest. Currently play out of Crystal Groves, the Duchy of Rising Sun Station. Been playing for about 20 years now, and a couple of the topics that I hope we cover today is a little bit of the character aspect, and a lot like TyeDye mentioned, making sure that knighthood itself is not the goal. More so about the personal excellence and maybe serving as a role model, being a little bit more beneficial Amtgard role both for the game and for the player.
First, I'd like to ask you guys, what does knighthood mean to you? You want to start with a newer knight?
I mean, that's a difficult question. In a lot of ways, it's more of an obligation than anything else. It's an obligation to keep doing what I've been doing. It's an obligation to be a good role model. And it's an obligation to be what a new person who sees someone wearing a white belt should see. So.
Repeat the question.
Sure. Let's first introduce our latecomer. Glen, would you like to introduce yourself and talk a little bit about why you're on this panel today?
Okay. My name is Glen. I am currently in Dragonspine, but primarily in Wetlands. And I'm a warlord. I'm not a knight. I'm qualified for 2 belts, but I have 0. So I'm not bitter about that. That's fine. Seriously, it's fine. So the reason I'm on this panel is I've been playing a long time. I've interacted with a lot of knights, right? I've seen people become knights. I've seen people be good knights. I've seen people be bad knights. And I'm very loud and opinionated, so that's why I'm on this panel. I'm to give you the counterpoint to all the knights talking about how great they are. And a drink.
Does that mean he's going to tell me how great I am because I'm going to say
all right.
terrible I am?
Show, to repeat that question,
Yep.
what does knighthood mean to you?
Tuesday. I mean, I still get up. I go to Amtgard. I do the same things I did prior. The one thing that changed upon attaining knighthood was quite a few views I had on Amtgard and Knights. One of those was I was able to see what I was doing to those that were my peerage and how much weight was on their shoulders trying to keep things flowing when you don't see that when you're just out there. So I feel knighthood is keeping that smile, keeping the game going, and bringing up the next generation.
I feel that knighthood is really a symbol. Really, you're already being whatever it was that you are, and now everyone else has recognized that you are a peer that really should have a good concept of the game overall. You should be a leader, perhaps a teacher in your particular subject area. Anybody should be able to send a person to a knight and expect that they would be handled professionally and that they would answer the questions to the best of their ability. And if they can't answer those questions, that they would know who to send them to.
So knighthood to me is about serving as a role model. The fact that I was elevated to and recognized as a knight means that people I saw as role models saw that I was deserving or that I had at least accomplished a level of personal excellence and carried myself in a manner that could be a role model.
So besides just that role model aspect, What do you think the value of knighthood is to Amtgard? And is it positive for Amtgard?
So I think knighthood is very positive for Amtgard as it's written, not always as it's practiced, but I think the fact that the game has a recognition program for character and personal excellence is invaluable to a game like ours, where we could try and instill some positive behaviors and things like that. So having knighthood in an awards program to me is an invaluable and definitely positive aspect of the game.
I think it's actually a very mixed bag. I've gone back and forth a lot in how I feel about knighthood, right? Because on one hand, the good knights are exemplars, right? They're the people we stand up with. And to kind of tie with the other question, I think there's also an aspect that knights are also the gatekeepers of quality, right? They have the cruddy job of saying, you're not good enough, right? Either you're not a good enough, artisan, skill craft, whatever your skill set is, or you're not a good enough person, right? And that's tough. No one wants to do that. And that's one of the crappy parts of being a knight. And that's one reason I'm not too upset about not being a knight, right? That's not my job to be like, you suck, too bad. The knights would have to say that more nicely. I'm a warlord, we just say that. But it's a mixed bag because we've got a tremendous history of just malfeasance and just crappy behavior chasing that white belt. And I think part of that is because a lot of the kind of cool kids, the people you want to be role models, the people that naturally get looked up to because they're excellent, have white belts. And a lot of people see that and go, if I had a white belt, people would respect me and look up to me. And it's not that, right? The respect and looking up should happen before the knight's belt. Yeah. But a lot of people think getting that belt will make them cool or popular or whatever. Yeah. And so I've seen I don't want to say a tremendous number, but enough that it bothers me of people really misbehaving to get knight's belts so they could be cool.
So that being said, why do you think people develop that stigma of knighthood is winning and that's how I get to be popular? And do you think it's bad enough that we should remove knighthood?
No, I'm currently still in the knighthood as positive phase. And I think that's where I finally settled. I think we get enough benefits from knighthood so it's worth the problems. And our game's been growing up. We're a lot better than we used to be. So I think that overall it's an advantage. And I forgot the other part of that question.
Why does that stigma develop?
Because some people are bad. Some people are just jerks or greedy and they don't have the right goals.
It's also that not everyone is going to be a knight, and that's okay. There's nothing wrong with the fact that not everyone's the right personality to be a knight. Every park has at least one kid that, is just not quite socially intact with everyone else. A lot of parks have a lot of them. And that kid is probably never going to be a knight. Not because they're weird, but because part of being a knight is having the social skills to deal with things, to deal with a wide variety of people. And I mean, yes, anyone can be a knight if they work hard enough. However, not everyone yes, and not everyone should. And it's when people think that I'm working so hard, why am I not a knight? When there are plenty of reasons. And part of it is knighthood is a terrible goal.
So I disagree. Everyone can be a knight. The reason I say that is I was qualified for my sword belt. I got my warlord in 2004. I was knighted a year ago. I was a shitty person. I was a very, very shitty person. I went out there, I stomped on people, on the battlefield, and I didn't care when I went home. I had no remorse. I grew. And without positive people, knights, in my life, I probably would still be a shitty person. Knighthood gave me that I don't like using the word goal for it, but it gave me a light to follow. And whenever I couldn't see it, I'd get pushed back towards it. So 11 years of redirection and soul searching to attain that light, I became a much better person. I was able to become king and accomplish a lot of things because I was able to make positive choices, not just for myself, but for those around me.
So, I mean, we go from congratulations, here's a tent, you may get a scroll, here's a masterhood, you may get a high five, a hug, and a scroll, and then literally, I mean, like prizes rain down on some of these people.
You need a
it's really
moving
hard.
truck.
It gets treated like it is winning in a lot of ways. And I think that really sends that mixed message like, okay, well, if I want to win in an achievement mindset, that's it. Because, wow, these people are throwing gifts at them.
So do you feel that maybe knighthood is held in too high of an esteem? So should that bar be lowered any? So that it's not
think-
so high of
I feel the
an
visibility
award.
of that bar is what the problem is depending on the circle that you're running in, that bar could be, I just have to do a little bit of applique and make a nice tunic, or I just have to go and you know, watch and strategically attend tournaments to win, make sure that, you know, Glen isn't there or Show isn't there, you know.
I mean, I think there are aspects to that, like, so, yes, knighthood is held in too high of an esteem. People should be excited that I'm going to their park because I'm another experienced player, not because I'm a knight. And I've watched, you know, before I was knighted, I've traveled to a park with 2 knights. 3 of us went to visit. I was completely ignored while the park we were visiting talked to those 2 knights the whole time. You know, that's not a thing that should happen. But I don't think lowering the bar is the solution. There are already knights that fall below the bar. I do think that kind of clarifying the bar is part of the solution, at least. I think lowering the esteem of it somehow magically is part of it. And I think raising the esteem of things like masterhood is part of it.
No, I think the bar should be higher, and I think it should be. I love your quote, and I'm not going to mess it up by trying to copy it. But I think our problem is we don't hold knights to the bar. Once they get through the finish line, if it's a finish line, it's sort of like, okay, cool, congratulations, high five, do whatever it is you're going to do. There's no expectation to maintain. And I don't think people have a problem with knighthood. I think they have a problem with knights. Because if we were really recognizing the exemplars, there would be no doubt in our mind why they got the attention, regardless of who's around them, right? But whenever it's somebody that's not, then it's only about the belt that you're recognizing, and that's the problem. And that's because we put our focus on the belt and not who's wearing it.
But that would be, sorry, I want to say something too. But that would be, I think that's the problem, is we don't hold the people, we hold the position in esteem. Right?
Yes.
It's, because I think knighthood is held in too much esteem, right? In fact, as a corollary, I think knighthood is too hard to get, right? I don't know how to handle this because I don't think we should lower the bar, right? I think the qualifications need to be held up, but you know, in the old days, it took, you know, a term in office, a couple years of fighting, whatever, and you could become a sword knight or a crown knight or a flame knight, whatever. Now it takes decades, right? I mean, at SKBC, they always do this panel, and they ask us how long we've been fighting before we got a warlord or a sword belt or whatever. And the guys that started in the 80s and early 90s are like 3 years, 4 years. The guys in my generation were like 18 years, 17 years, right? That's not realistic expectation to have for people that want to play Amtgard, right? They want to be knights. Knighthood's cool. That sounds cool, right? A paladin, you get to be a knight or a belt, you know, called sir. It looks like fun. But we've made it so hard to get. For the average Amtgard, it's not a realistic expectation.
All right, sorry, I'm in. What's the distance between warlord and sword belt? Because I'd be curious if it isn't.
I don't know.
If warlord isn't the big stumbling
Yeah,
block.
it's the qualification.
Not so much as knighthood, and agreed the qualification, but I think that's what's grown because we've gotten very competitive, and the bar has been raised, and maybe it should or shouldn't. But I think through some of those, and especially going to SKBC, that would be the gap that I would be curious about.
Yeah, and it is primarily the qualification, right? It's how long does it take to get your qual? I think the average time between, and this is me just spitballing from what I've observed, is like a year or 2, right? I mean, you're really an outlier in your time between warlord and sword. Yeah. Most people, it's like the next event, right? Like someone gets a warlord, I'm like, well, be the next event, so you get knighted. Ironically, at this event, we also have somebody that's been a warlord for a long time who's getting knighted today, tomorrow?
Tomorrow at 4.
Okay. But normally it's pretty quick.
Yeah.
So, I mean, really, it's kind of a related topic, but I think we need to find some way to train people up faster. The Wars and Wetlands have been talking about this. How can we get people to the bar we want to set without making them work at it for 15 years?
So let's.
No, I've gotten way off
Oh,
topic.
sorry. Let's try to reframe that question a little bit, and this will bring in what TyeDye mentioned earlier about the value of masterhood. What's your opinion on possibly separating masterhood versus knighthood, so that the two, it's not a step, masterhood, knighthood, but it's 10th, and then they split.
All right, so
How does that become not a step, though, if you have to be a master to be a knight?
Well, you would no longer have to be a master to be a knight. You would get to level 10, 10th award,
So
and then value, it would
you didn't
switch.
attend the previous panel where they talked about how
I was winning the strongman competition.
whatever.
Just
It
so
was
you
the
know.
history of Amtgard panel. It was awesome. Where they talked about how it used to be where warlord was essentially equivalent to knighthood.
Okay.
Sword knight. They were two branches off the same fighting path, and so knights were expected to, let their opponent pick up their sword if they dropped it, and maneuver them
yeah.
so that their eyes weren't in the sun and things like that. Whereas warlords were allowed to do those things. Ever since I've heard of that idea, I've loved it. I've loved having a way to honor the people that are really, really good at what they do, but they just don't have that character. Because it really is almost unfair to the people that are really, really good at what they do that we don't give them our highest honor. But we can't, and we shouldn't, because there is a character element to knighthood, and we need to keep that character element in it.
So, but is that the goal, though? I think that's the challenge, is if it was split entirely, I would almost see more value in it, because then it's two total separate entities.
Yeah.
Right? But the moment that you say one, if you said you had to be a knight before you could become a master, guess what knighthood just became?
Right.
Yeah.
It just became the
Just
latter, right?
swapped.
So, and saying you've got to get to 10th before master, typically 10th is masterhood. I know there's usually another issue or another, but if you're hitting 10th, you've just lowered the conversation, but you haven't lowered the expectation, because you're still going to expect kingdom level of quality to earn the 10th in the first place. And then, so I think it's more of a word choice. I think you got to look at them separately and say, what are we trying to do? If we're trying to have as an enterprise, as an organization, if we want to recognize character and personal excellence, or the pursuit of excellence, and we don't split them, then it's always going to be an issue. Just like, wow, you're a class act, but you really need to work on your fighting or your service or in order to do it. But nobody talks about that. That there's
The
great
intangibles.
people of character that aren't pursuing the other thing, because they are weighed 50-50, because those are the two quals.
I also
That
think
you split them or don't.
Sorry.
No, you're fine.
I also think that idea is kind of doomed to failure because it has to come organically. We actually kind of see it already in the fighting arena, right? Warlords are held in pretty high respect. When I step on a field, people go, oh, that guy's a warlord, right? I get more respect than a lot of knights who aren't fighting, right? Because that's part of fighting is a big part of our culture. But that's something that we've held up already as this is a big deal, right? I mean, one of my buddies in the Knights of the Wetlands asked me, does it bother you that you're not going to get knighted? And I said, I don't really care that much because everything I want to do, teaching SKBC and being an authoritative source and promoting fighting, the warlord title gives me the authority to do that. Oh, that's right. Sorry, I almost waved my hand. Sorry, I'm still kinetic. So in that case, we've kind of already done that, right? When someone gets their warlord in the fighting circle, that's a big deal. Everybody's like, oh my God, and it's a thing. And the knighthood's almost like frosting on that cake that they've already gotten, right? Whereas when someone gets a crown belt, you serve an office, you do a great job, you get a Grand Duke title, no one seems to care very much. I mean, I've got titles, I enjoy them, they're fun to role play with and stuff, but no one really cares, right? But then that knighthood then becomes that big step. Oh, now you're a crown knight, right? So that there's not held in esteem by our society, and that has come from within. We have to value that, and no one does.
So, Glenn hit something that kind of ties into one of your first statements, and the difference between a master and a knight, I feel, is that teaching aspect that, like as a warlord, I was going after that. Period, end statement. I'd help every once in a while. But after I got to that, I breathed, but I kept trudging forward, and I was dragging people with me. I was teaching. I've taught at SKBC. I've taught people how to do arts and sciences. I mean, that I feel is the biggest step, is being able to be assessed as a great or even a mediocre teacher, but you're teaching. You're putting forth effort towards others. Selflessness.
I need to change the subject just a little bit. Earlier you mentioned that it seems like people have problems with specific knights, not necessarily the idea of knights. How do each of you handle members of your peerage when they're no longer acting in that role model capacity and that exemplar capacity? And how do, of course, you, as not a knight, what do you expect the peerage to do about such individuals?
Strip belts. Wetlands is good at that. So, and that's what I think is do. If someone's not, in fact, it really bothers me as someone who's not a knight, even as a knight, I think it bothers the same amount, when they say, well, so-and-so did X horrible thing, right? So-and-so punched Casca in the face because they didn't like the way she was moderating, right? Well, we shouldn't strip their belt, though. That would be excessive. Whoa, 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 whoa. So you're saying punching Casca is something that's still knightly? Right? I mean, a lot of times that taking that belt street is this horrible thing, and so you can say, if they're still a knight, you're still holding up as an example better than everybody else who didn't punch Casca in the face, right? And so stripping belts, man, if someone's not stepping up, gone.
I think it definitely comes down to like what it is that they've done. I mean, there's certain levels. I mean, if someone just called somebody an idiot, I don't know that we should just strip their belt.
Yeah, no.
But, but there's levels. But at some point, we definitely need to start stripping belts from people, depending upon what they've done. But that should be the...
And I feel like that threshold is way too high right now.
Yeah, but discussion should probably be had about like what constitutes that, and make that clear to everybody. Like, this is totally crossing the line, and this is not. Like other than that, if it's something like low end, like they're not acting like up to what you'd like to see as a knighthood, I would like to see that that person gets like private message, or you call them, or you talk to them about like whatever. Like that's gonna be a minor situation, and if possible to like publicly praise people and like privately discipline them. But at the same time, at some point where it goes up the ladder and it's something really big, then that is where you need to go ahead and make a big public display, and they need to be stripped of it. I mean, that's for sure. But there needs to be levels of escalation. They need to have warnings and be understood. Like, you've crossed the line. You need to start pulling yourself, rein yourself on in. So,
I agree with both of those. We need to check each other a little bit more than we do. I haven't had a whole lot of situations where that's been the case, I'll be honest with you. Other than one-on-ones, like, what are you thinking? But it's rarely because of the belt. It's more like, hey, you're a knucklehead. Oh, hey, and by the way, you're a knight. So other people are watching you be a knucklehead.
Yeah.
But I definitely think people should know the moment you're not acting knightly, by whomever's definition it is, they should know that they're going to be addressed, and people should be comfortable saying, hey, you represent me as a knight of the wetlands, and you're embarrassing me right now. Cut the crap, because then you're not going to get an opportunity to represent me as a knight of the wetlands anymore, because I will come for your belt.
I know, I know in the Neverwinter Circle of Knights, there have definitely been times where they've called out. Like, I don't know about previous years, but since I've been on it, there's definitely been times when people have called each other out. Like, hey man, this has been happening. I don't think this is right. So I think that is a step in the right direction. That is occurring.
So one of the things that I've done in the past is take the person off to the side, have a communication with them, and then, without naming names, during the next circle meeting, bring that subject up without naming them. That way they're a part of a large conversation, hearing what the other peers are saying, and hopefully make a correction so that they can start being what everybody envisions as knightly and being held to standards.
So you bring up a good point there. In your kingdom, it's something that's addressed by the COK. When should that conversation about stripping belts happen? And should it be something that the COK should be initiating? Should it be something that a monarch should be taking care of? Or just concerned citizenry running it through the all thing?
So, Northern Lights, everything gets pretty much run through the all thing. So any member of our kingdom can literally bring up removal of a belt. Period, end of statement. It could be a day one individual. It could be myself. Heck, it could be somebody that just transferred. Let's say Glen transfers up. He sees something he doesn't see nightly. He can put it on the next all thing docket. I'm not lying. I mean, that's how our corpora is written currently. So when should it happen? When gross negligence happens. Period, end of statement. They need to be removed.
What about those people who don't cross the line? They just toe up to it.
They just toe up to it. Many communications. Communicate. Get them off the line. If they're not going to get off the line, back the line behind them.
If you're having a conversation about towing the line, it's the wrong conversation.
Correct.
Yeah, I think that one of the things we have also aware of, not just knights, but all players, those people that always come to the line but never quite cross it. If someone's towed that line 4 or 5 times, you just move that line so they're over it. Right?
Yep.
Because there's a lot of people that are experts at dancing that line, and they just continually cause problems. You ban their ass. Right? In this case, strip their belt and ban them. right? But yeah, if someone's always towing the line, that just means they're a talented troublemaker. Doesn't mean they're a good person.
Agreed.
Okay, so let's back away from the idea of unmaking knights and go a little more towards making knights instead. Let's see now. So, do you feel that you have to be a part of a belt line in order to be knighted? Is that easier? And what are the benefits of being a squire or a man-at-arms?
Absolutely not. I do not think you need to be in a line to attain the seats that we're in right now. We had a knight, Shaden. He was not belted to a single individual. He is a sword knight now, and he made it there. And what happens is when you're clawing and scraping and getting your stuff out there, whether artisan or fighter or whatnot, you have friends. Like, I would like to call these individuals my friends. I've just met most of them, but there'll be a respect given, and I will step forward. If no one else steps forward for this person in a circle, I'll step forward. I'll put a banner for them. Squireship, it helps. It means that there's somebody that is either pounding the heck out of that person, going, block this, or there's somebody sitting there going, all right, slow down, take that corner, take your tension, whatever. I'm not a sewer, and giving them the fine points to make those nice sharp edges on the applique and coming off. I think that is a benefit for them because they have that tutor. But then again, I think knights should be teaching more to everyone than just their belted one.
So I think it also has the benefit that you have an advocate on the Knight Circle already looking out for you.
Yep.
And I agree with everything you're saying. The nice thing is you've got a mentor who's already been there, done that, and can help you progress. But having an advocate that's keeping you on the radar is always a benefit. I think also sometimes we fall through, I've seen it and I know I suffer from it sometimes, is there's a little bit of a pride at stake whenever you've made a knight, when you've seen a squire elevated. So sometimes you champion them a little bit more than you would somebody who's not in your belt line. Again, I say I struggle with it because I find myself really advocating for this person, but if they're not really on my radar, sometimes it's a little bit more difficult to be able to advocate with that depth. And then the team effort and the rest you said I thought was fun.
It's also just that, psychologically, you are more aware of things that people that you are interacting with do. You know the projects that your friends are working on, you're more likely to see how much work they put into that feast, or, how complicated the seams were on that tunic or something. So you're more able to champion for them. But it's definitely not required.
Yeah. I think really being connected is the thing. Whether that's symbolized with a belt or not, but being connected and getting other people that'll mentor you, and knowing you want to go ahead and make something exemplary, or you want to go ahead and work really hard or whatever. But if you have the right people you're talking to, well, what is exemplary? Where is the mark? What are some things I can go for? So if you have those connections, that is definitely going to be of help. Whether it's actually under them as a belt line or whatever, it's all about the connections.
Then how do you know when someone has completed master quality work? Where do you, when are they there? How do you know when that is?
So we have an album on the ANS Anonymous Facebook group where we've tried to gather various, at least arts and science type works of various levels. And I actually have the habit of kind of flipping through that when I'm recommending someone for an award and seeing how does this compare to the other items that I've seen. That's certainly not all that there is to it, but a lot of it is just comparison and does this... A lot of being a skilled enough person at your task to be a knight, to me, means that you have changed Amtgard in some way. You have changed what the standard of Amtgard is. So it's pretty obvious with sword, but there's some good examples with other paths too. You have changed what people expect from an event, or you have changed weapon tech, or what level of quality people expect from a tunic.
I don't think you quite need to be transformative. I feel like in that case, we'd all be Brennan Squires, and that would be it for knighthood. But I do feel that the best criteria is consensus of the other masters, right? I mean, one of the things that helped me get towards warlord is when the other warlords were starting saying, hey, are you a warlord yet? You should be a warlord, right? And that made me start thinking, okay, I'm getting there. Of course, I still had a knight to get past, right? Get his approval. So that, though, talking to the masters, that should be something every monarch, anytime they're making a knight, they need to check the masters. When the master's like, no, they're not good enough, that's usually a sign they shouldn't get there.
Speaking of being Brennan Squire,
It's amazing.
what made you start that relationship with him? What did you look for in a knight? And then for the others of you, what do you look for when you're looking for maybe a squire or some other type of belted relationship?
Okay. Well, the thing I was looking for is I've always fought. That's what I care most about in Amtgard. So I wanted somebody that was an active fighter and could work with me on fighting, and who I respected as a person, both for their intellectual ability and for their fighting ability. And that's really what I looked for. And that's why I became his knight, or his squire. I'm not his knight.
I mean, when I became a squire, before I was knighted, it was someone who gave me opportunities to do more of what I was doing. I am a flame knight. Being belted under her gave me the legitimacy to take on larger tasks. People would trust that I would follow through because she had my back.
In my line, I don't take squires. I groom and promote man-at-arms into a squireship, even though I've only been there a year. But I've run my belted line as such since, I've had 3 knights. I had Sir Talon Star Chaser, I've had Hunter White Wolf, or White Wolf the Hunter, and Stefan de Sala. Each one of those held a different belt. None of them were sword. So the first thing I look for in my people is first sword, and then second the diamond in the rough, whether it's flame, crown, or serpent. So.
I typically look for people who treat others with respect and have enthusiasm for the game and are really involved in it and they want to do a lot of stuff, and also possibly if they're well-rounded. But I have 2 squires currently. I had one I went from page to man-at-arms and then out to squire, and one that I started with man-at-arms and moved up to squire. I've just kind of just watched them grow and give them exactly what they were saying, like opportunities. Really, that's what I like to do. I don't really like to set up a regimen like you do this and then you do this, and once you do this, you get your next thing, and I'll put in a recommendation for you after you do this thing. When I see opportunities where I think that they could excel at, things that I know that they're good at, I usually like to try to say, hey, you should try out for this spot. Maybe this thing will be good for you. Maybe would you be interested in this? I know you have an interest in this. Try to let them know when opportunities arise that I think they could shine.
So I don't look for belted, and I don't expect people to ask for it. It's organic to me. Like I have a relationship, we're working on projects, we're doing something, boom, boom, boom. And if that becomes a part of the conversation, then it just sort of happens. But short of that, that's it for me.
All of you are from a variety of areas in Amtgard. Why do you feel it's easier to become knighted in some kingdoms as compared to others? And how would you feel it best to go about really standardizing this beyond just award standardization?
I'll start. I do think it's easier in some kingdoms, and the thing I talk to most about is fighting, because that's what I pay the most attention to. And usually it's newer kingdoms, right? The longer a kingdom exists, the more experience your fighters have. Also, the farther you go away from the Golden Triangle in Texas, the worse the fighters get. So if you're in a newer kingdom, it's easier, and that's just the way it is because people have to grow as fighters. I think a way to resolve that is require people to win in multiple kingdoms, not just your home kingdom, which is always a problem because maybe you have a comer and maybe you train a lot with the one sword that kingdom has and you manage to get good at beating that guy, right? And then you come out and say, clan, all the other warlords just whoop the crap out of you, right? You don't want to be that guy. You want to be the guy that shows up and you can hold your own against all of them. So I think requiring some travel.
I mean, I think that kind of is why I have the standard of changing Amtgard in some way. Because your name should be known on an international scale to some degree. You don't have to be as known as like I am. I do a lot of very visible things, but you should be someone that someone in every kingdom has heard of you. You have had some sort of effect on the game outside your chapter. I was going somewhere and I've completely lost it.
You did touch a really good point though, TyeDye. National level. like any of my up-and-comers coming up in the Northwest right now, I tell them one big thing, especially on sword side and on the garb side, because, well, what's a warlord but a banner, right? Just put the beauty on and go.
Make us tunics.
Make us tunics, please. But national level, when I walked on site, Glen walks on site, anyone on here walks on site, you don't even have to know this person, but they're going to run up and be like, hey, GoldCrest. Hey, Glen. Hi, TyeDye. National level. You can walk onto an IK event, Interkingdom event, and be known. If a discussion happens, people either respect you or, they're like, who are you? So national level is what I tell all of my people up in the Northwest. If you want masterhood, knighthood, I'm gonna message one of these people and be like, have you ever heard of so-and-so? Who? Okay, thank you.
Yeah, I think. Oh, sorry. Yeah, I think that it definitely is. We do have different levels, not just from kingdom to kingdom to attaining a knighthood, but different levels from person to person, and they've done different things to get to their different spots. I think part of that is that it's not really very clear in our rule standardization as to what things mean other than like first rose and 10th masterhood, or first and 10th. Like for a lot of our stuff, it just says like one example for one thing and one example for the end. And so this whole road in between is just this really big unmarked map, and people just shuffle their way through it, which is where having that guide, is nice. That mentor, that outline, it may come in handy, or those just general connections. But I think that if we came together somehow, which I think that there's been efforts in making that happen, that if we actually had some sort of layout where it's pretty clear, like this is this level work, this is that level work, this is the number of hours of doing this type of thing. If that were laid out in our rule book for our standardizations for those awards, for those ladder awards, then I think we would see a much more equal table as far as Amtgard and their knights.
With keeping that in mind, with the national level recognition you're thinking of, how do you handle mentorships across kingdom lines when you're not in the local circle of knights to be able to give your input?
I'll tell you, so I've been invited to participate in a number of Circle of Knights. At Golden Vales, Celestial Kingdoms, Northern Lights, because I've had belted people there, or I've participated enough, Dragon's Mine obviously, but because I've participated enough to where I could give input if names were brought up, or I've got a squire playing there. So usually I've been invited to participate in those conversations and provided an opportunity to advocate for my folks. That's what you're going for, right? The COK approach? Okay.
If you weren't invited, would you ask to join? To be involved?
Yes. Todd of Gord. I did not understand for the life of me why, and they don't, I think now, but I didn't understand for the life of me why I wasn't even allowed to participate or attend their Circle of Knights meetings.
Yeah, I don't know why.
Right, yeah, I mean, like, literally, like, no, you can come, GoldCrest, go do that, so. It was really awkward, and I think they've resolved it now where you can participate, so that was really weird, and I advocated for that one, because I think to me, one of the biggest problems, and I didn't chime in on the last one, Amtgard hasn't figured out what it wants out of its knights. We've came up with award standardization, and I mean, even in V7, there was earlier push, and I was a big advocate for it, about putting role model or character or something in there. And there was a huge kickback, like, you can't do that because it's subjective, and we need a roadmap. We need to know exactly how to be told. Well, that's called masterhood to an extent. Mm-hmm. And then if we're going to say character, then it is going to be subjective. But we have this idea of a knight of Amtgard. You're not a knight of Amtgard. You're a knight of the kingdom that you're at, that lets you do, that you're either a role model for them, as in you represent them, or they're the ones letting you get away with that stuff, because I can't affect, other than personality, I can't affect any kind of power over the Celestial Kingdoms right now and who they should knight. Yet suddenly we do this thing like, oh, you're now a knight of Amtgard, recognized all over. Yeah, but I didn't get input. I didn't get input at Crystal Groves and who they're knighting because I didn't attend the meeting once. So and then all of a sudden, congratulations, you're a Knight of Amtgard, and Northern Lights Knights have to by default be lumped in with knuckleheads from insert kingdom here. That's the kind of stuff I don't understand with knighthood and Amtgard in general.
Well, part of it is they can move to your kingdom.
Which
We in the Whitelands, we can knight some knuckleheads and
irritates
send
me
them to
to
you.
no end. Yeah.
Have some knuckleheads.
And then all of a sudden,
So,
they've got equal voice. That's an irritant. But
so here's the big question then. Then what do you want the future of knighthood to look like?
I'll tell you where I wanted to start. I want to start with Amtgard, and I want to talk a little bit about it. I want to try and be brief about it. But I don't think we need a decoder ring for what character is. But I think Amtgard needs to talk about what it values out of its players, and then those people that exemplify what Amtgard has said it values should be recognized for it. And what I mean by that is, if Amtgard says that community is important, if Amtgard says that being respectful and participating and pursuing excellence is important, and we define those, and we have a Amtgard standard as far as what our goals are as a game, then you can sit there and say, okay, here's the 4 or 5 items that Amtgard has identified as part of its vision and its value stream. This is what we're trying to find, whether it's donation or time, volunteer. Then you can gear towards that, and then you have a report card to say that's what we mean by character. But right now we mean, he's a good guy, she deserves to win, she got her masterhood, high five, yay you. Because the only people that successfully hold themselves to a standard are the warlords. And because they do it at an inter-kingdom level, because they self-moderate from the bottom up. Because Amtgard coming down with a decoder ring has not been successful.
Even that's been an organic thing, because like I've been involved in SKBC, not like teaching or anything, but a student there until recently. But I've been going to them for a long time, and I've been part of the fighting culture for a long time. And it's been a very gradual process. Right? When I first started fighting Amtgard, fighting was all about keeping people down, and the warlords were assholes, and it was not a friendly fighting thing as you got up the tier. But that slowly changed. A lot of that comes from SKBC, go Amhog. But that's been a very slowly evolving culture, right? To start having these standards, and now it's expected, right? And once it becomes expected, people want to do it because that's how they fit in, right? Oh, I want to be a cool kid. Well, the cool kids are also teaching. Well, I better go do the teaching, right? And it makes people want to do that. So that's, I kind of like to see the other knighthoods get in line with sword knit belts, really. I shouldn't say we. Sword belts aren't perfect, but I feel like it's getting better, and it's been on a good trajectory.
So do you feel that knightly character, that aspect of it should be codified in some way?
Definitely. I feel like the people that don't want to be codified, some of them are looking just for an excuse to keep being assholes. Because if there's a list item, they'd be like, you're not doing this, then they're in trouble. As long as it's not a list, they can be like, well, it's not a list.
No,
Why people are getting
right now
COC?
is, well, I'm not being banned for code of conduct violation, so I haven't hit rock bottom, so I get to stay at night, right?
And people fought that, I feel like, for the same reason. We can't have standards for behavior.
What do you mean I can't take that person's banner and hide it?
Just for the record, y'all did this to me last year, so this is fine with me.
So what about some of you newer ones? How do you feel about the idea of codifying conduct? And what sort of things do you feel that are the lesser known objects, or the lesser known ideas of knightly behavior that should be included?
I'm absolutely in favor of codifying it. My only fear is that we'll get people saying, well, if it says you can't punch people, I didn't punch her, I kicked her. That's not bannable, or that's not belt strippable. So I think anything would have to be very careful to be general, which I believe it was when it was pushed for. I don't know. Character is hard to write down, I think, is the problem. I want them to have a good character, and I'd know it when I see it, probably.
I believe codifying behavior is a good thing, but I think focusing the codification strictly on knights, yes, great, but what about everyone else? So we have to, I understand we need to be that pillar, that light, whatever, but does that mean that everybody else is wallowing in the mud? I think a full, global codification of conduct needs to be done. I took a stand this last reign for illegal conduct, whether it's, stealing, pushing, punching, all that stuff. Up there, we're no longer dealing with it in-house. We're not keeping it in the buddy system. We're calling the cops. If it's illegal, let people do the paper trail. Codification of conduct, we just need to do it. Get it done.
Yeah, I think one of the key things is definitely like, don't do illegal things at events. I think that should definitely be top priority, period. I've actually made this as a suggestion. I won't say it got very far, unfortunately. And then to be respectful. I try, particularly on public forums, I think actually is really maybe the key, because honestly, you need to be able to vent to your friends because so-and-so did whatever, and you just need to kind of rage off on the side because everybody's human and we need to go ahead and vent that. But at the same time, like, I think that we need to try to hedge ourselves a little bit away from doing unnecessary disrespect and flaming. I mean, at the same time, boards need to be managed and so on, but that can be done, that should be done on a professional level where it's laid out, like, on the boards, like, here are our expectations, here's our code of conduct. If you break this, boom. And keep it as, as little as personal as possible. The problem is if the mods aren't handling it, then sometimes vigilante justice takes over, and that's just kind of what occurs. So,
I don't see a problem with holding Knights to a higher standard because it's optional. I've been playing Amtgard for years with a tremendous amount of fun. Not a knight, don't have to be one. All right, Knighthood, I'm okay with having extra standards. If you don't like it, don't take the belt, give it back. It won't change what you do. Well, you can skip the Knights meetings, which I heard suck. So that's a benefit, right?
Only when you're invited.
Yeah.
We
So,
have food at ours.
I'm going to show up to yours.
All right, let's give you something a little more lighthearted. Show, you mentioned several times Pillar of Amtgard, Face of Amtgard, things like that.
Yep.
You also mentioned garb, and Glen mentioned wanting garb. Should knights be required to have excellent garb? Should they look the part of the example that they're supposed to set?
I want to say a different word, but yes. When I look at somebody that's a knight, if I see them in blue jeans and a wife beater and a white belt, I want to walk up, grab the white belt, drag them off the side, take my garb off, put them on them and go, no, go get dressed, you're naked. I think they need to look the part all the time, minus shoes. One of the things that, I'll do, I make wrap pants, the ones I'm wearing now, I'll throw them at nights that are wearing blue jeans. So yes, I think they need to look the part 100% of the time. They should have had it well beyond their masterhood.
So would you no vote a candidate if they didn't wear garb regularly?
Yes, I would.
It's interesting that they can remember their belt, but they can't remember their tabard or
Right?
Okay, let's go back to something a little harder now that we've... We talked earlier about high esteem or potentially lowering standards. Should any...
Whoa. We didn't say lower standards. We said make it easier to reach our current standards. Nobody here wants to lower standards.
No.
Okay. Should any of the different types of knighthood be harder to obtain than they currently are? Because right now, sword knights are in the minority in most kingdoms. I think it's something like 1/10 of 1%. Crown and serpent are roughly tied, and then flame outnumbers both combined, all three combined, something like that. And of course, your mileage varies by kingdom, but should certain types of knighthood be harder or easier to get?
There's definitely something that should be harder, right? In fact, a lot of times I use the Brennan rule. Have you done more for Amtgard than Brennan? If not, you can't have a flame belt. So, but it's a rule now. We're putting it in V9, actually. It's coming in.
And you had a problem with my requiring inter-kingdom effects.
Yeah, I'm inconsistent.
Okay.
A little dehydrated. But yeah, I feel like actually flame is too easy to get, in part because we all help out, right? It's a volunteer organization, right? So there's a lot of helping done. And flame, some people, I won't say all flame belts are bad, right? Brennan's flame belt is well earned. But there are some flame belts that I feel people just got too easy.
What about crown and serpent then, since they still are not as rare as sword?
Most serpent knights haven't made as much stuff as Brennan either. So
All right, someone else on the panel, not Glenn.
I think Crown should be mapped out a little bit better. I
agree.
think that Crown is the only one that we say, we don't care what you do up until it's higher level works.
yeah.
Everything else is, hey, let's build momentum, let's generate some kind of steam going. Start smaller wins are still wins towards that path. Crown's the only one that we say, do whatever you want to. When you get real and you're running Dutchy or higher, then it's all in and everything counts for a point. And that just seems a little bit lopsided to me.
It's not to take away from the moderator, but here's a question for everybody here. Do you feel that a crown knight needs to sit in the hot seat, the pointy hat, be king or monarch, before you would give them a crown belt?
No. I'd want to see a variety of positions, but like I've served in Kingdom Office as Prime Minister and Champion. I've served in a large Grand Duchy, all positions, right? And working in a Grand Duchy was so much more work than Kingdom level.
Oh, yeah.
But all those positions require skills, right? I mean, if you're champion for a Grand Duchy, running a battle game for 80 people every week that makes them all happy, it's impossible actually, but it's a tremendous amount of work, right? So that requires a whole skill set that's totally different than being king, but it's not an inferior skill set just because you're not king, right? And people are like, well, they're not making the important decisions about, you know, whether to knight somebody. Yeah, but they're making the important decision every day about what everybody does for fun. And that's, to me, a more important decision anyway.
I agree.
And that's so it's an awkward conversation for me because I was never even monarch higher than a barony level before I was awarded. So it's like, okay, how are you going to hold people to different standards? So I'm compelled to stick with award standardization, but I've got no problem advocating for somebody who's showing leadership because sometimes it just doesn't happen.
Yeah.
If an individual isn't at that highest level in awards, though, but you feel that they're there with skill and or character, preferably both, obviously. What about the idea of, since 10th and Masterhood are recommended, what about the idea of possibly having, and I've seen it happen, knighthoods that occur before hitting 10th orders and Masterhood?
I support it, but I support award standardization more, if that makes sense. No, I do, but Amtgard came up with a rule set that it wants us to stick to, so I feel compelled to try and meet what Amtgard has tried to define. But if we're going to say that character has a heavier weight, I'm a fan.
I think that my answer is no, with the exception of Crown, because I feel like the Crown system sucks. Local office is so important for the benefit of Amtgard. I mean, you're a Crown Knight because from doing great stuff at the local level, right? Before you were Knight, I knew about you, right? You're using your criteria, you were transforming parts of Amtgard. And so that's the problem with Crown. But if you're that, like, you're a great fighter, right? Like, Jaylee's a good example of that. Jaylee got really good and wasn't a warlord, right? But the wins came, you went and streaked to like 63 in a row, right? If you're good enough, just wait a little while, it'll come, right? The rush to knight somebody often causes problems, right? In fact, Neverwinter had a good example of that with the first knight we made. They wanted to rush knight. There was this big competition about who were going to knight first, and that was dumb. It was a mistake, and it caused problems all the way down. If someone's good enough, they'll get the awards. Right? And if they're not getting the awards, it's probably the kingdom.
What about that idea coupled with the idea of dividing Masterhood and Knighthood? Then where would you put the line of skill?
I wouldn't divide them. I think the current system works as it is. And as we talked about, no matter where you divide it, one's going to be the inferior one. Because ultimately people look at the skill, right? If you're a mediocre fighter and a sword knight, and you have to be a better fighter to be a warlord, now people are going to be like, well, sword doesn't count, warlord does, right? If you say, the other way around is what we have now, right? Now it's different. So I don't see a way to do that.
Well, that's why I advocate for two parallel endpoints that are at least theoretically equal and that we are trying to make equal and trying to make equal gifts for. So one thing that my belt line has kind of been working on is trying to make masterhood more important by making gifts. So it's not just you get presents when you're knighted, you get presents when you're a master too. Even if you never get knighted, you've still got presents.
Well, we're getting
Oh, sorry. So one of the things coming up, through my 21 years in Amtgard that I kept hearing in the Northwest, whether it was under Mystic Seas, Valley of the Silver Rains, Black Spire, or Northern Lights, a up there, we kind of separated 10th and Master with a term we call the Master's Project. But unfortunately, that only really went under like Flame and Serpent, because what am I going to do for my Masterhood for Flame? Well, you know, back then, it wasn't codified for, you know, lions and roses when you're supposed to get them. They just gave roses for everything, you know. But a Master's Project, what on a kingdom level are you going to produce that can wow the rest of the Amtgard world?
I really like that idea.
Well,
Like
we're-
basically a thesis.
Yes.
We're getting a little short on time here. So let's go ahead and get some closing comments. Just your 2 or 3 takeaway points that you want all of these folks back here and those online to remember.
All right, well, I'm going to go a little off top of what we talked about. One additional point. When we do it at Knighted, I always give my Knighted speech, try and talk them out of it. Because one of the things that all Knights need to be aware of is that eventually you're going to run down. You're going to stop making stuff. You're going to stop fighting as much. You're going to stop being as amazing as you were when you got Knighted. I mean, that may take years down the road, but eventually you're going to kind of peter out, right? You may just get old, right, and you can't fight anymore. Maybe your interest shifts, right? But you're no longer going to be amazing in the field you got Knighted for. And a lot of Knights get used to this idea of everybody respects me and thinks I'm totally awesome. And that's because you've earned it. But eventually you're going to stop earning it. And that's when you have to stop expecting people to think you're awesome and treating you like that. Because I've seen so many Knights that get all bent out of shape because people aren't, you know, treating them like they're awesome. When you're not awesome anymore, right? What have you done lately? Nothing. You were great then, but the people here now don't care, right? And so you have to learn that humility and go, oh, guess I'm not important anymore. I'm not a big deal anymore. This white belt isn't showing that I'm awesome because I stopped being awesome. That's my closing note.
So I never actually got to say why knighthood is a terrible goal. Knighthood is a terrible goal because it's not a goal that you control. You can control whether the next thing you do is super amazing. You know, you can control whether you feed more people at that feast or something like that. But you can't control whether someone decides to hand you a piece of paper. You can't control whether that group of people decide to yes vote you. You can control your behavior and make it more likely. But that way leads to bitterness. I hate seeing people get bitter because of knighthood. I really do. Knighthood is a terrible goal. Don't get bitter. Just have fun. Play Amtgard. You can have fun without being a knight.
Why do you have to take all the nice words? So my closing would be play Amtgard. Make friends. People will talk for you. People will defend you. People will come after you. But in the end, when you walk off that field and you're sore, or you walk out of that Dragon Master with, you know, no information or information, find it. Find that information. Grow. Don't get bitter. All it'll do is sink you, and you'll be an angry person. So don't look at it as a goal. Just think of it as something on the horizon that may or may not come today, tomorrow, never. But we're here to have fun at Amtgard.
Yep, exactly. Have fun, strive for perfection, make friends, and if that ends up with a night belt, cool, whatever. But you know, you want to be having fun. If you're not having fun anymore, you probably shouldn't be involved anymore. So you know, make friends and strive to be better all the time.
My experience isn't that people have a problem with knighthood, they have a problem with knights. And that the conversation should be less about knighthood in the general, the safe space, and more the so-and-so did something that I thought was inappropriate, and they should be chastised, reprimanded, or whatever by the appropriate authority that can do so. And we need to look at that more than the broad institution of knighthood.
I have one more closing statement. Damn you, GoldCrest, we never talked about Paladin and Anti-Paladin.
Yes!
I made sure it was on the list.
All right, I would like to thank our panel members for spending their very warm afternoon with us. And everyone, please give a round of applause to our volunteers for being in this room all day. Thank you, everyone. Have a good day.